The dust rolled up from the wagon wheels as Mary Ellen Grayson pulled the shawl tighter around her thin shoulders. She had only been a widow for 6 months, but each day felt like a year carved out of her soul. When her husband died in a mining accident, she was left with nothing. No land, no savings, and no family willing to take her in. At 23, she carried only a cast-iron skillet, a bundle of patched clothes, and a determination not to starve. Rumor had reached her in town about a wealthy rancher who lived several miles west, a man who paid fair wages, though he kept to himself. Folks whispered that he was proud, cold, and not the sort to take kindly to strangers. But he had a daughter, a little girl of 6, motherless since birth. Some said the child wandered the big ranch house like a shadow, lonely as the prairie moon. Mary Ellen swallowed her fear. She couldn't beg, and she wouldn't sell herself cheap like some widows had been forced to do. She could cook, she could clean, and she could work hard. That had to be enough. When the ranch house came into view, her breath caught. It was larger than any home she'd ever seen, 2 stories of stone and timber, surrounded by corrals and barns where ranch hands moved about like ants. Horses stamped the ground, and the sound of cattle drifted across the open fields. She stepped down from the wagon, dust clinging to her hem. Her knock on the heavy oak door echoed louder than she intended. The door opened, and there he stood. Jonathan Hale. Broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, and stern as if the world owed him nothing. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, narrowed when they fell on her. He looked at her shawl, her worn boots, her weary face, and his jaw tightened. "Yes." His voice was clipped. Mary Ellen clasped her hands together. "Mr. Hale, I came to ask if you might allow me to work for you. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. Anything that might be of use." Jonathan leaned a hand against the doorframe, silent for a long moment. "I have no need for charity cases." The word stung, but she steadied her voice. "I'm not asking for charity, sir. Just honest work. I can cook a meal that'll make your men forget they ever tasted beans from a tin." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it hardened again. "I already employ help." Before Mary Ellen could reply, a soft voice floated from behind him. "Papa." A little girl peeked around her father's leg. She had golden hair tied with a faded ribbon and eyes that shone with curiosity. She studied Mary Ellen carefully, as though measuring her worth with the innocent wisdom of a child. Jonathan shifted, almost as if he'd forgotten the child was there. "Go back inside, Lily." But Lily clung tighter to his leg, staring at Mary Ellen. "Is she here to cook for us, Papa?" Jonathan hesitated. Mary Ellen's heart twisted at the girl's hopeful tone. Jonathan began, but Mary Ellen interrupted gently. "If your father allows, I'd be honored to cook for you both." The little girl smiled, wide and genuine. "Papa, can she? Please." Jonathan's stern eyes softened for a fleeting second. He sighed, stepping back. "1 meal. That's all. If it's worth my while, we'll discuss further." Mary Ellen nodded gratefully and entered the house. The kitchen was large but lifeless, pots neatly hung yet unused, shelves filled with flour and beans but lacking warmth. It didn't take her long to find her way around. With sleeves rolled up, she mixed cornbread, sliced salt pork, and stirred up a stew fragrant with onions and herbs she'd carried in a small pouch. The smell drifted through the house. Ranch hands poked their heads in curiously, drawn by the scent. Lily perched on a stool, watching Mary Ellen's every move with bright fascination. When the meal was served, the men ate heartily, exchanging surprised glances. Jonathan tasted quietly, his expression unreadable, but he didn't stop eating until his plate was clean. "This is "Acceptable," he said at last. Mary Ellen's lips quirked. "I'll take that as high praise, Mr. Hale." The ranch hands chuckled under their breath, and even Lily giggled. After supper, Mary Ellen helped Lily wash her hands and tidy up her hair. The little girl clung to her fingers as if she'd known her forever. Jonathan watched from the corner, arms crossed, his gaze sharp but strangely conflicted. When night fell, Mary Ellen gathered her shawl, preparing to leave for the wagon yard in town. "Thank you for letting me stay long enough to cook. If you'll allow, I can come again tomorrow." Jonathan gave a short nod. "We'll see." But before Mary Ellen could step through the doorway, Lily's small voice rang out. "Papa." Jonathan bent down. "Yes, sweetheart." The child looked up at Mary Ellen, then back at her father. "Can she tuck me in too?" Silence filled the room. Jonathan's eyes flickered with something raw, pain, hesitation, maybe even longing. Mary Ellen's breath caught. She hadn't expected the question, hadn't expected her heart to ache at the sight of the girl's hope. Jonathan straightened, his voice rough. "That's enough, Lily. Off to bed." But Lily shook her head, stubborn as only a child could be. She tugged at Mary Ellen's hand. "Please, just tonight." Mary Ellen glanced at Jonathan. For the first time since she arrived, he didn't look like a man of stone. He looked like a father torn between pride and his daughter's happiness. Mary Ellen bent down, smoothing Lily's hair. "If your father allows, I'd be glad to." Jonathan exhaled, slow and heavy, before giving the faintest nod. And so Mary Ellen followed Lily to her small room, tucking the little girl beneath a quilt stitched with fading flowers. Lily's eyes fluttered shut as Mary Ellen whispered a prayer over her. When she rose, she found Jonathan standing in the doorway, watching silently. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgment, a fragile thread of trust. And that was how it began. The next morning, Mary Ellen returned before sunrise, her shawl wrapped tightly against the crisp chill of dawn. She half feared Jonathan might send her away, pretend last night never happened. But when she stepped into the kitchen, she found Lily waiting in her nightdress, hair tousled, eyes sparkling with sleepy joy. "You came back!" the girl exclaimed, racing forward to wrap her arms around Mary Ellen's waist. Mary Ellen laughed softly, smoothing the child's hair. "Of course, sweetheart. I said I'd cook, didn't I?" Behind them, Jonathan appeared, boots clicking on the wooden floor. His gray eyes lingered on the sight of Lily's happiness before shifting to Mary Ellen. "You're early," he muttered, though his voice lacked the sharpness of yesterday. "I thought ranchers rose with the sun," Mary Ellen replied with a hint of courage. For a second, Jonathan's mouth twitched as though he might smile. Instead, he grunted and sat at the table. By mid-morning, the smell of biscuits and fresh coffee filled the house. The ranch hands, used to dry beans and charred bacon, couldn't hide their delight. They sang Mary Ellen's praises, calling her a blessing dropped from heaven. Jonathan remained reserved, though his eyes often drifted toward her when he thought she wasn't looking. Mary Ellen worked tirelessly, not only cooking but scrubbing the kitchen until it gleamed, patching worn curtains, even sweeping dust from corners long neglected. All the while, Lily trailed after her, holding her hand, asking endless questions. It became clear to Mary Ellen that the little girl was starved for more than food. She craved tenderness, a woman's presence. Every time she touched Lily's hair or knelt to tie her shoes, Mary Ellen saw Jonathan watching, that guarded look softening by degrees. But the townsfolk noticed too. At the mercantile one afternoon, whispers trailed after Mary Ellen as she purchased flour and sugar with the coins Jonathan had pressed into her palm. "The widow wasting no time, is she?" A woman snickered behind her hand. Imagine, aiming to marry into all that land and wealth. A bold one, that Mary Ellen. Rich rancher like Jonathan Hale wouldn't give her the time of day, unless she's stirring his stew along with his heart. Mary Ellen's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. She was not there to trap a man. She only wanted honest work. Still, The rumors spread like wildfire. One evening, Jonathan returned late from riding fence lines. He found Mary Ellen humming softly while Lily dozed in her lap. The firelight painted her face with a golden glow. For a moment, Jonathan simply stood in the doorway, silent. "You'll spoil her," he said gruffly, though his voice held no real scolding. Mary Ellen looked up, her fingers still stroking Lily's hair. "Children don't spoil from love, Mr. Hale. Only from neglect." The words struck him deep. He turned away, jaw clenched, as if hiding the storm inside him. Later, when Lily was tucked in, Jonathan lingered by the hearth. "You should know," he said finally, "I don't need complications. My life is simple. Work, ranch, providing for my daughter. That's enough." Mary Ellen folded her hands. "And yet she asked me to tuck her in. She needs more than a roof over her head, Jonathan." Her use of his name startled him, but he didn't correct her. Instead, he left the room, the unspoken truth hanging heavy in the air. Days turned into weeks. Mary Ellen became part of the ranch without anyone deciding it aloud. She cooked, sewed, laughed with Lily, and even helped the ranch hands with chores. The house, once silent and cold, now echoed with warmth. Yet Jonathan fought it. One night, after supper, he found her on the porch, staring out at the wide prairie sky. "Mary Ellen," he began, voice low, "you've done more here in weeks than any hired cook has in years. But folks are talking, saying you aim to trap me, that I've taken up with you." Her shoulders stiffened. "And what do you believe, Mr. Hale?" He hesitated. "I believe you're not like them. But I can't afford distractions. A man in my position—" She spun, eyes flashing. "A man in your position has a daughter who begs for a good-night kiss, who clings to me because she's starving for a mother's love. If that's a distraction, then perhaps you don't see what's right in front of you." The silence between them sizzled with raw honesty. Jonathan's chest rose and fell, his eyes searching hers. But before he could speak, Lily's sleepy voice called from inside, breaking the moment. The turning point came during a storm. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howled through the cracks. The cattle grew restless, and the ranch hands rushed out to secure the herds. Jonathan saddled up too, ready to ride into the tempest. "You'll be killed out there," Mary Ellen cried, grabbing his arm. His gray eyes met hers. "If I don't, we'll lose half the herd. I can't risk that." Before she could argue, Lily's frightened sobs echoed down the hall. "Papa, don't go." Jonathan froze. The child's fear pierced him more sharply than the storm. He looked back at Mary Ellen, who held Lily close, whispering comfort. Something broke in him then, the wall he had built since his wife's death, the silence he had mistaken for strength. He stepped forward, cupping Lily's face. "I'm here, sweetheart," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." Mary Ellen's eyes softened, tears glistening. She saw it, the change, the surrender of a proud man to the needs of his family. In the days after the storm, Jonathan was different. Still quiet, still reserved, but the sharp edges had dulled. He shared coffee with Mary Ellen in the mornings, asked her opinions on ranch matters, even teased her once or twice. One evening, he found her sewing by lamplight. Lily was asleep, the house peaceful. He lingered, then cleared his throat. "You've given this place more than food and order," he said slowly. "You've given my daughter laughter, a childhood. You've given me something I thought I buried years ago." Mary Ellen looked up, her hands trembling. "And what's that?" "Hope." The word hung between them, tender and powerful. He stepped closer, taking her hand in his calloused palm. "Mary Ellen, I've been a fool. Too proud, too blind. But I can see now what my little girl saw the first day she asked you to tuck her in." Her breath caught. "And what's that?" His voice dropped, steady and certain. "That you belong here. With us. Not as a cook. Not as hired help. As family. As my wife." Tears filled Mary Ellen's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. She had prayed for survival, never daring to dream of love again. Yet here it was, in the rough hands of a man who had once shut the world out. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Jonathan." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go. From the hallway, a small giggle broke the moment. Lily peeked around the corner, her little hands clapping. "I knew it! I knew she was Mama." Jonathan chuckled, scooping his daughter into one arm while keeping Mary Ellen close with the other. For the first time in years, the house felt whole. And under the vast prairie sky, love bloomed again, quiet, steadfast, and stronger than the storms that had tried to tear them apart.